parents, welcome back to Teenager Tuesday. This is Tisha Solomon here, the student pastor at the Frisco East Campus. Joining me again this week is Summer Butler. I'm so glad to have you back here. Man, parents, if you have not went and checked out last week's podcast, you need to do it. Literally, truth nuggets, bombs drop, just incredible good stuff. You need to go listen to it. I think that it will help you as a parent, no matter what stage you're in, no matter what season of life you're in. I really do think it would help. So I'm excited to dive into today. Summer, I know that you have just a great background too, a master's in counseling. I think you're going to talk a little bit about that. Yeah. I'm excited to hear a little bit about that. But I'm sure that a huge question that you get as a blended family is like, kind of, how do you make this work? Yeah. What does this look like? Yeah. And you had mentioned in our last podcast, like, you know, your husband, he has two boys. Yes. And then you have an ours baby that is our family's, right? Yes. And I'm sure that I'd love to know a little bit about how the boys responded to that, what that looks like for you guys, kind of I'm sure that everyone is very curious about that.
Yeah. Well, walking in, when I met Andy and the boys, they very much, I think, received our relationship uniquely. You know, they were 6 and 8 at the time, so the 8-year-old really had a little bit more history with mom and dad together. Yeah. And I feel like God had just prepared me for that relationship in a lot of ways. Yeah. When I first met Pate, he was a little more reserved about accepting me in his life. I think it's confusing for kids. They don't understand how, I think his question was, you know, does summer mean that mom and dad are no longer getting back together?
Got it.
And there was a process of grief that I think he needed to walk through.
With that realization.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he actually asked that question. I was putting him to bed one night and we were tucking him in and he was like, you know, if you and daddy get married, does that mean mom and dad will never get married again? Yeah. And, you know, I think in those moments where it pings your heart, it's hard not to take it personal. Yeah. But having walked through where he has been, God had prepared me for that moment. And I think what is so important with kiddos and blended families is giving them the opportunity to express those feelings, right? Grieve the past and also the future that they were thinking could have been
the reality.
Right. And not taking that personal, just allowing space for that. Yeah. And that I think was such a bridge builder for our relationship. Yeah. And not that I did everything perfect or most things right, but I do think in that moment God had prepared me not to take that on to a personal level, but just allow him to walk through that. Yeah.
Well, and it speaks volumes about you creating a safe place for him to even ask that question. Yeah. You know, because he could have not asked it. He could have kept that internally. He could have just asked his dad, but he asked you knowing that you were a safe person to ask that to. And I feel like that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't always look at the wins. I think we're always harder on ourselves than everybody else. But so as we progressed, I think the boys really they had made the comment at one point they didn't want Andy and I to have another baby. Yeah. They wanted to be enough for us. That was their feelings. Yeah. And then, you know, God gave us Eli, which is, he's 8 now, but the boys, we had a conversation at a dinner table and we just talked about like love is unique, you know, and it's not equal. And that we as parents love each of our kids uniquely, you know, and just like we love, you know, our parents and our grandparents, you know, love is just a unique combination. And so when we can understand their love language is how they receive love, not necessarily how we give that love, then we can start to connect with them on a different level. And so it was really important that we explained to them Eli coming into the family doesn't take away anything, right? You know, it adds to, it's only adding to. And you know, for the most part, that has been received well. I think the boys, there's enough of an age gap that it helps, but they really received that message in a way that I think felt less threatening. Yeah. Less threatening.
That's awesome. Yeah. So. No, that's really good. I think that that's probably some huge things for blended families as they come in. Like, what do we do? What are the steps? Should we not? There's no manual, you know?
There's not.
Yeah. And I'm sure like even even still to this day, with the age gap, with Eli being so young and your oldest being a little bit older, it's still just a figuring it out type of process.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think the best analogy or the best advice that I have is that it just takes time.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people walk into blended families specifically and really want it to mesh immediately.
Yeah.
And that's not reality.
Yeah.
You know, you're dealing with lots of people that have emotions, that have feelings, that are grieving past relationships, that, you know, really may not even want this current relationship, and allowing the time and space for the kids specifically to work through that. You know, it takes a lot of intentional effort to not take it personally.
Oh, for sure.
But the way that I have found for myself, and I don't want to say, you know, disengage emotionally necessarily, but I think if we can, like I said in the previous episode, stay in our lane and really focus on who and what I can control. And if I can control my relationship with Christ, which I know is the only steady through any relationship, and really just focus there, that sets me up for the most successful person to show up and be for them. And I think that's kind of the point of the aligning the hierarchy of heart and home, you know, the subtitle to the book. I think it's just so important to get our hearts right with God.
Absolutely.
And to figure out, okay, if in these situations where maybe I'm triggered by a teenager's behavior, or maybe I'm triggered by my stepson's behavior, or maybe I'm triggered by my biological son's behavior, you know, what is that trigger saying about me? And instead of looking at it as a behavior, start to look in the mirror instead of the window. So how and what is God trying to refine out of me through this thorn? And how can I reflect on how I am or maybe am not showing up as his shepherd to this little flock? What is he trying to purify out of me? What am I trying to show up differently and be?
Has there been, that's so good, thank you for that. Has there been challenges that you've seen as you've walked through parenting two stepsons, one biological son, like just the difference between, I don't know if it's even a difference. I'm using that word very loosely because I'd love for you just to speak in to just maybe the love that is shown in the family. And I know you've talked a little bit about like a unique love versus an equal love and kind of what that looks like. I'd love for you to talk about that for a minute.
You know, for us, and I think maybe a easier way to get to this question is like, a lot of times we counter-parent.
Okay.
And there's, you know, situations where the other home and our home may not agree on how we parent. And how do we show up in a Christ-like way where we are not putting down another home or other people, but rather counter-parenting in a way where we feel, you know, this is Christ's way and we need to show Christ's love.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another question I'd love for you just to lean into a little bit is, you have 3 boys in your home. And I'm sure all of them are a little different. The dynamic is probably different with each one of them. I'd love to know how you love them all, maybe individually, or what that looks like for you.
You know, it's tough because the age gap, you know, it's just, we have to get creative in ways that we can connect as a whole. But what I've learned is really connecting on an individual level, spending one-on-one time with them based on how they receive love. I think so often we show up and give love the way that we receive.
You want it,
right? Like, because we just live in this world where that feels normal and natural for us. So like Patriot, the oldest, he very much is words of affirmation. He loves that, you know. So one-on-one time is another important thing for him. So I just make sure that, you know, every now and then I'll send him a little text like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I love you. Hope you're doing good. You know, let me know if I can support you in any way. Really kind of opening that door for communication, and whether he chooses to walk through that or not is okay. That's on him.
You can't control him.
You cannot control
just
him.
yourself,
and Creed loves, he loves all the things, but he is kind of my sushi friend. So we go have sushi together, and that opens the door for conversation there, you know, and just Eli loves football, so anything sports related or whatever. So just, I think, identifying for each of those kiddos, like how can I speak love to them in a way that isn't necessarily just an I love you in the morning, right? And showing up for them differently so that they feel seen and have the opportunity to be heard. So good. It just has to happen on an individual level, and it's not always comfortable. Like, I think that's good to understand and realize, like, it can feel uncomfortable to show up, in a teenager's room and say, like, hey, you want to go have sushi today or whatever, and face the fears of possible rejection too. Like, no, I've got this and this to do. That's not about you. You've opened the door. They know you're there.
Well, and I'm also of the opinion, and you may disagree with me, but the more you do something, the easier it gets.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, the first few times might feel really hard, really difficult. And it's almost like, the butterflies in the stomach, like, should I go do it? Should I go? That type of thing. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to put myself out there. And again, you can't control their response, but you can control what you're doing. And so the more you do it, the easier it becomes, I
100%.
think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. Summer, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
This was incredible. Thanks again for being with us. So fun. I can't wait for next week.
All right.
Parents, thanks for showing up today too. Listen, you can do this. You're not alone. God is with you, and so are we. We'll see you next week.